Okay, good evening. Welcome to the World Teach webinar as we discuss international summer teaching opportunities. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We have over 60 listeners on the line with us tonight, so we're very excited to start the conversation amongst our listeners. We have some new applicants, those that have just been accepted into some of our World Teach summer programs, and other people that are interested in learning more about our summer teaching opportunities. So my name is Brooke Wallace. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Communications at World Teach. I was also a volunteer in Colombia in 2013. Also on the line with us, we have Caitlin Ivester, my colleague, our admissions coordinator, and she's also a Costa Rica summer alum from 2008. And then the most important, we have 8 panelists on the line with us tonight representing each of our summer country programs. They were recent alumni in 2014 and 2013. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Let's get started. So we're going to go over our agenda, and just quickly as we start, you guys are muted, but if you have any questions, you can chat them in through the chat function on the right. So feel free to send us any questions. We'll either address them individually or as a group together at the end during our Q&A. So, okay, our agenda. We're going to address some general summer program details, logistics, dates, what and where our volunteers are actually teaching, and the layout of our 2-month summer program. Then we're going to address why there's a volunteer fee, because of course that is everybody's first question, and how to fund your service abroad. After that, we're going to be covering the support and training that's provided to our volunteer teachers, and of course that's the most important. And then quickly we're going to review the application process and volunteer qualifications. So the majority of our discussion tonight is going to be coming directly from our previous volunteers that, as I mentioned, they're on the line with us right now. We've got 8 panelists. They were all teachers, like I said, last year and in 2013 as well. So they're going to be answering some questions about their experiences, so we'll get a little brief glimpse into each of our summer programs. On the screen, we're going to show their bios, therefore what backgrounds and experience they brought to their classrooms abroad. After that, we'll have some time for Q&A. So again, you can chat in your questions, and we'll probably address them at the end. We do have staff on the line to respond to you as well. So let's do this. Okay, so World Teach Summer Programs. Just a quick review. So as you see, we'll have our 9 programs here. I mentioned that we have 8 panelists on the line, but we do have 9 programs because we have a brand new program in Micronesia. So we'll discuss that, though we don't have an alum because the program is new. So we have our countries here, but what are our teachers actually doing in these places? So as you see here, World Teach partners with ministries of education and other organizations in developing communities across the globe to provide volunteer teachers in places that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford native English speakers or qualified teachers. So our volunteers are full-time teachers, so don't forget, you may be a volunteer, but you are a full-time teacher. We're teaching English, computer technology, other subjects. It depends on the needs and the requests from our partner schools. And so we're teaching at schools, camps, community centers, adult education centers, etc. It all depends on what the academic calendar year is in that country, because obviously it's summer here in the States, in North America, but it may not be in other countries. So it depends if school is in session or not. Therefore, we are teaching at other institutions as well, camps, community centers, etc. The program dates vary slightly. So we have some programs departing between the end of May and the middle of June, and then they'll return early to mid-August. And all this information is on our website, but we're just kind of quickly reviewing it in general here. So all of our programs for the summer are 8 weeks long. So your first week is going to be in-country orientation, which we'll address in more detail in just a few minutes, followed by 6 weeks of actually teaching. So you'll be at your site doing what you went there to do, which is to teach. And then the final week of end of service, so this is kind of exciting. We started this just last year in 2014. You'll actually have a week of local site traveling with the group while reflecting and analyzing on the work that you guys did in the classroom that year, or excuse me, that summer. So that's just a bit of the program in general, so let's get into more specifics. Caitlin, can you take us through funding your international service?
Absolutely. So everyone's first question is, of course, why do I have to pay to volunteer? And that was definitely something I wondered about as well. So don't worry, we'll get more into it. As mentioned before, World Teach is working in developing communities. Therefore, we're working with schools and government organizations that just don't have expendable funds. Our year-long programs are funded by our in-country partners because it's a huge investment for their communities. But the shorter time frame of the summer programs is just a little too short for them to invest in. So the volunteer pays for all of the in-country support, which we'll review in the next slide. So you can see on the screen that the volunteer fee is $3,990 plus airfare. The volunteer is responsible for airfare. But our new program for Micronesia is $2,990 plus airfare. So since a lot of you are current college students, you should absolutely check with your school to see if there are departments or offices that offer grants or funding or scholarships for international service work. I can speak to this personally. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2009, and I was able to do the Costa Rica summer program in 2008, the summer before my senior year, because I got funding from Notre Dame. And I was really, really lucky to have that opportunity, and I might not have been able to go otherwise. So I absolutely encourage you to look into it. We currently have partnerships with Posse, Harvard, UNC Chapel Hill, and Notre Dame. So if you attend those institutions, let us know, and we can provide you with further information. Now, a listener has asked about whether volunteers have received college credit for their service. This is possible through certain departments, as it can be considered an internship if it's related to your course of study. So you can speak with us further about this or ask your advisors on campus, and feel free, of course, to shoot me an email if you have any questions about any of this. Or chat in their question, and we'll be happy to answer it. So for applicants that have already graduated or can't secure funding through their university, we highly recommend fundraising. Our volunteers do a lot of fundraising in their local community because, as you can see, this is a lot of money. Definitely a financial sacrifice. So World Teach can provide you with fundraising ideas and can connect you with previous alumni who are successful in raising all of their volunteer fee, and sometimes even more. So after the webinar, we'll email you our fundraising packet for additional information.
Awesome. Okay, Caitlin, thank you so much. So now you know what you're paying, but where is that money going? So this is, of course, extremely important. So this is our support and training, and this is what your volunteer fee is covering. So this is your work visa, housing and meals, health and emergency evacuation insurance, which you might not think you need, but everybody needs it, orientation and training conferences, like I mentioned, the week of group travel excursions, your field staff, and in-country transportation. So between all of your training sites to your house site, etc. So I'm sure many of you are thinking, I've never taught before. How am I going to know what to do? So that's why we have our training, which we take very seriously. So you're going to have extensive teacher training sessions every day. Focused on whether it's teaching English as a foreign language or computer technology in Namibia, that sort of thing. So you're also going to be receiving curriculum and lesson plan resources that have been designed specifically for the country that you're working in so that you can use that in the classroom if you need to, if you want to. And then, of course, you'll also have local language classes each day. So that's the first week of training. Now, also a note on field staff and safety, because this is absolutely imperative. So during orientation, you're also going to be reviewing a health and safety, just reviewing all health and safety precautions specifically for your country and for the certain cities or towns that you're going to be living in. You'll also most likely visit the local embassy for to continue the safety briefing. And then once you get to your placement, you're checking in with your field director weekly. So that could be whether it's a text message or an email or a phone call or in person, etc. And then you're probably wondering, am I going to have internet? Am I going to have a phone? These are all things that we're going to keep talking about. But yes and no. So yes, you can absolutely get a phone. Almost all of our volunteers do. It's probably going to cost you about $30. And most of these countries, it's just, prepaid. So you add, $5 worth, and that will last you a couple weeks, depending on how much you use it. And internet will definitely be accessible in some places, and in other places, less. So you could find it at school, maybe, or maybe not. Maybe in your house, maybe in town at an internet cafe. So that communication with your field director is very important. We take that very seriously. Our safety is very important. Like, it's important to know if there's a hospital in the town where you're living or how far it is from you, if you're bringing medicine, those sorts of things. So this is all stuff that's done and thought out before you get to country and then reviewed during orientation as well. Okay, so also a note on housing and meals, because this is very important as well. So almost all of our volunteers will be living with host families. In some countries, we're like living on school grounds, so it's not with a host family. And therefore, all of the host families will be feeding you, which I'm probably assuming was the best part of most of these people's summers, or the worst part, depending on how they do with foreign food. So you'll probably be the only volunteer in the house, and even in that community, and probably in your school. You could be 30 minutes away from the closest volunteer. You could be even further. So also during orientation, again, all of your meals will be provided. So really, ideally, once you're in country, there should be no out-of-pocket expenses that are necessities. So yes, you might want to buy a cell phone. You might want to buy some time on the internet, like in a cafe. But in terms of housing and food and like living, you should not be paying for anything. So we recognize that it's a lot of money to get you there and to get you your visa and your health insurance and your housing and all of that stuff. But everything will be covered once you're there. Okay, questions so far? Raise your hand, text it in, let us know. We're getting to the good part. Caitlin, well, this isn't the super good part, but before we get to the good part, Caitlin, can you help us with the application process and volunteer qualifications?
Absolutely. So I'm seeing a lot of names that I recognize on the attendees list, which is awesome, and a few that I don't, which is equally awesome. So I know I've spoken with a lot of you already, and you all have probably reviewed this information, but just to review quickly, applicants for our summer programs must be native English speakers or of native level of any nationality. You don't have to have teaching experience, but of course a commitment to serving and learning and a flexible attitude especially are musts. You don't need to know the local language. It won't hurt or help your application. It's definitely, easier to get around once you get there if you do know a little bit of the local language, but it's not a necessity, and we also have language training and orientation. So the required application items are listed there so you guys can see, but as well they're on our website. And then we are accepting applications until until two dates, until April 15th for the Costa Rica and the Namibia programs, and that's because they depart a little bit earlier than the others, and then until May 1st for the rest of the programs. So I would definitely say that you should get your applications in sooner rather than later, just since we do accept on a rolling basis, so you can kind of get all your ducks in a row and find out about the decision, which is made about 2 to 3 weeks after the application is completed. And as Brooke already mentioned, the program departure dates do vary a little bit.
Okay, fantastic. We did just get a question about whether the volunteer fee that we're paying, that $3,990 or the $2,990 for Micronesia, if that money is going back to the volunteer when you get back to your home country after the summer ends. And unfortunately, no. So that money, again, let me just backtrack for a second. Oops, if I can go back. So that money is going to all of the logistics for these things. So your housing and meals, your visa, because in some of these countries it is required to actually work, even though we are volunteer working, but that it is as such. All of the training, so again, you're going to be like with the whole group in whether it's a finca in some of these Latin countries, which is a farmhouse, or on school grounds in places like China. You will be with your group being fed and housed for all of orientation, receiving all of those materials to help you in the classroom, all of the travel to get you from the training conferences to your site, the group travel at the end, which is a solid week of travel. So that's pretty great. And we do that because we know that people want to travel during the summer, but they won't be able to because they're full-time teaching. So this way we do it together, and it's going to be much more affordable as well. And we have another good question. When is the money due? So we can set essentially installments. You submit the money within the months leading up to departure, and it all, of course, depends on when you apply and when you get accepted. So you'll be putting down like a $500 deposit to confirm your spot in the program, and then you can send in installments after that. Yeah, so good questions so far, so keep them coming. Thank you so much. So let's go forward to where the good stuff is, as I mentioned. Okay, so now we get into actually hearing from our panelists that are on the line. So they're going to have a quick minute to introduce their country. So you'll see on the screen that we have program details, including where, what, and who our volunteers are teaching, because it varies completely by country. Every program is completely different. You could be teaching elementary in, for example, Ecuador, and you would be teaching adults in, for example, Morocco. You could be in a rural area, you could be in an urban area. So these are details that you have to look at and research that are on our website so that you can then decide, where do I want to go? You only apply to that one program of your choice, so these details are pretty important. So again, you'll see those program details on the top of the screen. And then also we've listed our volunteer biographies right below so you can see where our volunteers have come from. So let's begin with China, where we're going to get to hear from Teresa, who is a summer volunteer back in 2004. So Teresa, thank you so much for joining us. So let's just start with the first question here on how it was traveling from camp to camp, because we know that in China you guys are working at camps and living on those school grounds with a group. So how was that? What was your average day like?
So, hi again, I'm Teresa. In China, we had 3 camps this summer in Zhangjiajie, Zhuzhou, and Nanyue in Hunan, China. For us, so in the first 2 camps, we actually stayed in hotels, which we didn't know about until we got there. But I guess at both the schools, they were working on their teachers' apartments, and it was construction, so we stayed there. The 3rd camp, we stayed on campus, and traveling was great because we spent our whole time as a group together, and there's only a couple hours in between each city, so it was pretty easy to go around. Our average day, I think I taught about 2 to 3 classes per day to mostly junior high students and high school students. In between classes, I would lesson plan, nap, and just probably walk around the campus a bit. And in the afternoons, we would participate in school activities with our students. So usually you would be with your class that you taught for the day and have team activities. And then there were optional language programs for us who wanted to study Chinese.
Awesome. And on that note, how did you feel about your language fluency by the end of the summer? Because as we see here, you did have some formal Mandarin experience before getting to China.
Yeah, so before I got to China, I had studied Chinese for about 2 years, and I was in no way fluent. And today I am still definitely not fluent, but after this experience, like going back to school, I was so much more confident with my speaking in class. I was much more comfortable. I certainly didn't feel that way when I was in China at the time, but there was a huge difference in confidence when I came back to the U.S.
Awesome. It's definitely all about confidence in my experience and just like forgetting the fear. That's great. Mm-hmm. So next question. What was a cultural experience or event that you got to participate in?
One that I remember particularly well was in Zhangjiajie. So in each city, our hosts would probably take us on weekend excursions, show us around the city. In Zhangjiajie, we went to a Tujia village, and that's one of their minority groups in the city. And we got to explore this village for a bit, and then we actually got to participate in one of their traditional dances, which was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And last question, did you spend any money while you were there?
As you guys have touched on, everything is covered by the volunteer fee, so I didn't spend any money on meals, housing. I spent probably the equivalent of $100 for my whole summer, and that's just because I was obsessed with milk tea and had to get that every day. So
Awesome.
that and souvenirs, but that's it.
Perfect. Okay, beautiful. Teresa, thank you so much. We could chat with you forever and ever, but we're going to go on to the next country. So again, at the end, you guys, we're going to have Q&A. So if you have specific questions for China or for any other country, text them in. And then, of course, we can also get you in touch with alumni after the webinar and even other alumni as well. So we can have more information forthcoming. Okay, Costa Rica. I feel like this is like a like Miss Universe, like introducing every country, and like you guys are competing against each other and which country is better. So let's see if Costa Rica wins. Just kidding. Okay, Costa Rica. So Abby Fong, thank you so much for joining us, a volunteer from just last year in Costa Rica. So let's just get right into it. First question here. Can you tell us about one student or one experience in your school or even in your community that will just, stay with you forever? Good or bad?
Yeah, well, well, all good, of course. One thing that really stuck with me was honestly my very last day at the school there. They threw me a little surprise going away party, which completely shocked me, and the kids were so excited to throw it for me. And when I got there, they all had made a special gift for me. They all read a little note for me in English. All the teachers went around and said what a great impact that I had on the community there. So that was just really heartwarming to hear from all of them to see what an impact that I had. And it was kind of crazy to see where they started from, and at the very end they used their very best English to write their notes to me and just say, like, we will miss you and things like that in English. So they were just so excited to show all of that off. And it was just really hard thinking that I'm not sure when I'm going to be able to go back there. So it's amazing how attached we can get in just a short amount of time.
Absolutely. You have to get back there. You have to. I was a
Oh,
volunteer.
of course.
Yes, I was a volunteer in Colombia in 2013, and I just spent Christmas and New Year's there, and I've decided I will be there for every Christmas for the rest of my life. You have to. It's your new home. Okay, great. Next question. So what was the level of English among your students and even the Costa Rican English teachers there?
My students knew basically zero English. They listened to like a couple songs in English or something like that they would hear on the radio. But other than that, they didn't know much more than about hi, how are you, or something like that. The oldest students, my 5th and 6th graders, had a Well Teach volunteer a couple years before, so they knew a couple of things like colors. But other than that, they didn't know anything. So I was starting completely from scratch. But that was actually really fun, because I got to teach them whatever I wanted to. So we had fun coming up with different topics to talk about, and they were really great at, trying new things, really exploring the language, having a afraid to make mistakes. So that was really exciting for them. In terms of the English teachers, I was the only English teacher at my village. So I was the only English speaker within a couple-mile radius probably of anyone else that knew even remotely how to communicate with me. So it was definitely a learning experience from that.
Wow. That's awesome. So that I think shows kind of why we're in certain communities, especially there in Costa Rica. Cool. So on that note, we know that it was a very small, as you say here, a small province, if you will. So how was it living in such a small town and being the only English speaker?
Mm-hmm. It was difficult not being able to communicate with people, especially right away. I see my next question is a little bit about the other volunteers and stuff, but other than that, I was the only one that spoke English. So if I wanted to communicate, especially at the beginning, it was a lot of charades work because I didn't speak much Spanish and they didn't speak much English. I'm originally from Nebraska, and I go to school in South Dakota, so I'm definitely a small town girl. So that didn't faze me at all, having cows living right next to you, anything like that. But in terms of that, you definitely get to know the community very well. I would walk down the street, and people would holler out teacher at me and say all these different things and, try to use what little English that they knew. So it was a really great experience in the community. But you definitely get to know them, and you definitely get to stretch yourself in terms of language and how to communicate effectively.
Awesome. And so then on that extended note, so did you see other volunteers often? Were they close enough for you to visit perhaps on the weekends, or how did that work?
Mm-hmm. I was a little bit further away than the other Costa Rica volunteers. A lot of the other volunteers were kind of nestled together a little bit better. I was up in the mountains, so it took me about 5 hours or so to get to San Jose, depending on the bus schedule. So I didn't travel very much just because I really loved my host family and they were really great about including me and everything, so I was never lonely. But there was a time during about the 2-week break in the middle of the summer that we had off from school, and so all the volunteers got together and went to the beach to hang out. So that was a great experience with USM to share the stories that we had and ideas for the upcoming couple of weeks. And then I saw them again. There's a big, kind of a pilgrimage, I'd say, at the very end of the summer. And so a lot of us went to San Jose for that, just to really take part in that cultural experience. So that was cool. Other than that, I didn't really see them a whole lot, but I have a lot of other friends that were volunteers, and they would get together every once in a while.
Awesome. Great. And how many volunteers were in Costa Rica? Do you remember?
I think there were 20.
20. Okay, great. So some of our, that's great. We just got a question from a listener, which is a great question as to how many volunteers are in each program. It differs, I would say, between 10 and 30. So Costa Rica was 20, China was 30. We have some programs that are smaller with about 10 people. So it all varies, which is good because it gives you either, like Abby was saying, you have your independent experience in your own site, and you do have social opportunities with other volunteers, but then really the opportunity is to immerse yourself in the culture and in that community. So you can spend plenty of time with English speakers when you get back home, but this is definitely immersion, and it makes it much more independent. So it depends what you're looking for. Each country is different in that sense. Okay, great. Abby, thank you so much. We're going to go on to Ecuador. So Carolyn Kalia joining us from across the street at Harvard. Thank you so much for getting on the line with us tonight. We're excited to hear about Ecuador. So again, a similar question. What was your students' level of English that you interacted with in your classes?
It was really basic. When I got there, one of my host sisters wanted to show me how she could count these little plastic spoons she had, and there were 9 of them, and she could count to 8 in English. I think maybe some of the older kids could count maybe to 29 and say a couple colors, and then sort of toward the ends, one kid was like, teacher, horse, and I was like, I didn't teach you horse, you must have known that before. But that was pretty much the level of English we got. It was just like a word here and there, a couple numbers.
And were there other English teachers, Ecuadorian English teachers at your school? And if so, how was their level of English?
So they're supposed to have English teachers. That's, I think, mandated by the government that all public schools have an English class. So their regular teachers are supposed to learn English to teach it to them. It didn't seem like that was actually happening in practice, though. Mm-hmm. I never had a conversation in English with the 2 other teachers. Their English workbooks hadn't been written in or cut up or anything. So.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So going on to the next question. How did you feel during orientation and then also after orientation? I know personally from my own experience, it can be very overwhelming, very informative, but it kind of exhausting. So how did you feel during and after that moment?
Well, to be honest, I felt nauseous for most of the time because I apparently do not do altitude well. But once that wore off, I thought I really enjoyed it. So we did some Spanish practice, we did a lot of teacher training, and then we did some sort of more cultural orientation. This is how to live in Ecuador. We did the health and safety. I thought all of the cultural stuff was really interesting. The Spanish, I came with a little bit of Spanish, so I wasn't too nervous about that. And then the teacher training was just really helpful. It definitely set us up well. So yeah, it was exciting, and it wasn't challenging yet because I was surrounded by other college students and other young adults, and we all spoke English, and the little challenges like getting the hot water in the shower to work were just kind of fun and exciting, and we were having an adventure.
Just the start of your adventure with hot water. Awesome. Okay, and so then once you were at your own site, what was your average day like?
So I'd get up pretty early because we were on farmer time, and I'd eat breakfast. They love just black coffee with so much sugar it's not recognizable as coffee. Mm-hmm. And then I would walk down to the school, and this super shaggy dog named Toby would follow me, and I would feed him bits of breakfast. And And then I teach my 3 or 4 classes. So I taught 4 levels of English and 3 levels of computer science or computer skills, but I didn't teach everyone every day. So I'd usually teach for about 4 hours, and I'd leave school around 11, and then I would usually run before lunch. It was just so beautiful in the mountains. And then when I came back, having run in the altitude, I felt like super awesome. And then I'd come back, I'd wash my hair in a bucket so I wouldn't have to get cold water on my skin, and then I would talk to my host family or read or journal or play with the girls in the afternoon, and we'd have dinner. And we'd go to bed pretty soon after dinner because the electricity is pretty minimal there. Sometimes it would just shut off around 9 for no reason. I played a lot of cards too. I lost so many dollars in nickels betting on that card game.
Well, then clearly we know that you spent money that summer. Awesome. Okay, and so this is a very important question. What would you say was the biggest cultural challenge that you faced, whether in the school or in the community?
So I think that Americans have a very sort of individualist spirit that Ecuadorians don't necessarily share as much. So what we would consider cheating, they consider cooperating. And that was really hard. They didn't even really have a word that meant cheating. They would say, helping, or sometimes they'd say, tricking the teacher, but it was never cheating, which has a negative connotation. So that was just hard for me because, my expectations for what classroom behavior would be like were really different from what it was actually like. So I could never get them to practice remembering things or never get them to memorize anything because they would just tell each other the answers. And so that was a challenge that I had to work around and just sort of think differently about. But then the adults would cheat in cards too, and that was really frustrating. The game itself that we played wasn't very hard, but figuring out the social rules around cooperating was really difficult. And that was strikingly upsetting because I really wanted to be accepted and I really wanted to participate, and I couldn't figure out how people were winning so much. So I think sort of that in both the classroom and the social aspect, just my expectations about cooperation and my expectations about when cooperation is legitimate were not at all lined up with my communities. That's
great insight, and it's actually, I think, quite common in a lot of the countries that we work in. So it's definitely something that a lot of people listening could potentially face, and I definitely face that in Colombia as well. So maybe it's a Latin thing, but it's great for a for a North American to experience. Okay, thank you so much, Carolyn. This was awesome. Again, I wish I could hear more about Ecuador and your experience, but we're going to go forward for this moment. Okay, Micronesia, as I mentioned, this is a new summer program for us. So Micronesia is located in the Pacific Islands, probably a place that you guys have never heard of before. It is indeed a U.S. territory, which is a whole other conversation. But for right now, so as I mentioned, because it's a new program, it has a lower program fee, so you'll see it there. World Teach has actually been teaching in Micronesia since 2006. So we have volunteers there right now. We have field staff there right now. This is Kate in the picture on the right. That's Kate. She's actually our director of programs here in the office, and she was in Micronesia as a volunteer and a field director a few years ago. So we've been there in Pohnpei in Micronesia for many years now. So we're pretty excited about our new partnership. We're working with Upward Bound, which many of you may have heard of. So we're working at summer camps. So in addition to teaching English and tutoring math and science, our volunteers are going to be coaching sports teams, supervising excursions around the island. So yes, you may see that word there, lagoons. You're going to be hanging out in lagoons. I couldn't even really tell you what that means, but that picture above kind of helps me figure it out, and it's looking pretty nice. So let us know how that goes out there in Micronesia. So if you want to speak with a previous volunteer that lived in Micronesia for the year-long program, we can definitely get you in touch with them. We don't have any summer volunteers because, again, it's a new program, but you'll be able to hear about the culture on the island and what World Teach has done there, why we're partnering, what we hope to do with this new partnership, with these camps, what the students are like, etc. But for tonight, it's just a brief intro. So more info to come on that. So we're pretty excited about this. So we're going to go forward. Morocco. Very excited to have Amanda on the line with us tonight. She was a volunteer in Morocco in 2014, which was our first program year for Morocco. So she was one of our first volunteers. So Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. So we're just going to get right into the questions. So tell us about a cultural experience or event that you got to participate in Morocco last summer.
I think that my two favorite events that I partook in were going to markets with my host sisters. And markets in Morocco are just kind of informal affairs. They're just spread between streets, but they go on forever, and they're just crazy with all the different kinds of foods and spices. And so I really loved that. And my second kind of favorite cultural experience was going to a mosque, and it's Morocco, so almost everyone's a Muslim, a practicing Muslim. And so going to a mosque with my host family was really exciting, and it was really just wonderful to see kind of the faith that's like so ingrained in the culture kind of firsthand.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I wish we had the opportunity to share pictures of those mosques because I bet it was amazing. Okay. Yeah, I know. Moving on to the next question. So as you guys can see on the bottom of Amanda's biography here, so she did have some formal Arabic practice before going to Morocco, but tell us about how you felt about your language fluency, because I know there's a few different languages spoken there. So how did you feel with it, like when you got there and when you left?
I had taken a year at this point of formal Arabic, but Moroccans speak a very different kind of Arabic, and so I got there with relative fluency. I was not fluent by any standards, but I could speak and read and write in formal Arabic, and then I get to Morocco and the grammar's like thrown out a window, and so it took me a while to really understand because people speak so fast there as well, and so they would see that I wouldn't really understand what they were saying, so then they'd switch to French because almost everyone in Morocco speaks French, but I don't speak any French. So it took me a while to be able to communicate effectively, but I found by the end of the summer I was able to understand everything that happened around me, either through context or just growing accustomed to understanding the way Moroccans speak. And I picked up a little bit of French, like very little. But I came back and I took Arabic this past semester, and I found that my comprehension was just so much better than it was when I left. My speaking, not so much, but my comprehension was fantastic, I thought.
That's awesome. It's a very good feeling. And comprehension comes first, and then response comes after. So you're on the road to success. Okay, next question. Did you feel safe in your community?
Yes. Definitely. I was in Morocco for all of Ramadan, so it's a holy month. And so activity kind of grinds to a halt during the day and everything happens at night. And so there would be children playing, little children, 5-year-olds or so, playing out in the street until 2 a.m. No parent supervision or anything. And so I was playing along with them. I felt completely safe.
Good. That's great. That's very important. And we're going to address safety as this continues. And if anyone has questions about certain countries, please text in because we know that safety is a concern for everybody, especially mine because I lived in Colombia and I can tell you it's not as dangerous as people say it is. Okay, great. Next question. And this, again, very important question. What would you say was the biggest cultural challenge that you faced, whether at the school, the community, etc.?
I think that the biggest cultural difficulty challenge that I faced was the fact that Islam is everywhere in Moroccan society. It's I'm not a very religious person, and I found that people would ask me like, "Oh, what is your religion?" And I said, "Oh, you know, I don't really have one." I kind of like dance around the question, and people would be like, "Oh, you should convert. You should read more about Islam." And I would tell them, "Oh, I'm taking Arabic. You know, I can read a little bit of the Quran. I don't particularly want to convert. Thank you." But I found that there are a lot of people there who feel a lot of pride regarding their faith, which is very valid. But it led to, at some points, a lot of frustration because people wouldn't understand, like, no, I'm happy where I am regarding my faith, but it's not the same as yours. I think that was the biggest difficulty, but at the same time, it was really beautiful to see people taking so much pride in their religion. Like, I remember one of the most vivid memories that I have of Morocco is of a man who was clearly homeless, and he was praying on a piece of cardboard right next to the road. And it was really just like a beautiful act of faith. And so while it was really frustrating and a challenge a lot of the time, it was also really wonderful to see. So
Yeah.
it's kind of both.
I think it's very important as well, especially in today's day that we live in, to see those things in real life and not just through the media. So that's really cool. Okay, fantastic. Again, another program that we would love to hear more about. But if you guys have questions about Morocco, just text them in. Okay, we're going to go on to Namibia. Jessica, thank you so much for being on the line with us. You have no idea how grateful I am for Jessica to be joining us tonight. She was a volunteer just this past summer in 2014, so we would love to hear about your experience. For those of you that aren't looking at the screen in this moment, you won't see, but in Namibia, we teach primarily IT, information technology, computer technology. So, Jessica, will you tell us how it was teaching computer technology, and had you done that before?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, wonderful. It was a little difficult. I'm a third-year teacher, so I've had experience teaching and lesson planning before, so that wasn't really my issue. Most of my issue came from I'd never really thought of myself as a particularly computer-savvy person, so I was a little nervous going into it thinking, well, I don't know how to tell them if there's something drastically wrong with their computer. But really, when it came down to it, people didn't know, like, how to hold a mouse or how to get to the next line if they're typing something. When I taught some adults how to just press enter or something, they were like so happy and so grateful and understanding how to use a space bar and things like that. So when I kind of got a grasp of how much computer, or actually how little computer information a lot of the people I was with knew, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. Teaching about viruses, that was more of the issue because viruses had like ravaged a lot of the computers, and I wasn't familiar with how to destroy one or antivirus type of stuff. But the program director, and we also have like an IT intern that works with Namibia, he was able to give us some of the information and give us like little jump drives with antiviruses to help fix some of the computers there. So that was something to easily learn along the way.
That's awesome. Yes. So again, to all you guys out there, you don't need to have a background in computer technology. The fact that you have grown up with computers is your invaluable knowledge. So things like Microsoft Word, those are programs that you don't even think about using, or that you don't even think about when you use it. But that is a huge lesson that could like really change people's lives, daily lives. Imagine writing your resume to apply for a job, or writing a letter, or doing your homework, etc. So that's really cool. We are super, super excited about our work in Namibia. So thank you, Jessica. Next question. Did you feel safe?
I did, like more than I thought I would, and more than other people thought I would, I guess. The principal at the school, I lived in the hostel part of the school, so I kind of was in my own room, had my own bathroom and everything. But the principal and his family really kind of took me under their wing, and they just really were very protective of me. And so the first day I was there, they introduced me to basically everyone in our little village. I met the police officers, I met all the business owners and the other teachers and everything. So after the first day, everyone knew I was there and everyone knew who I was. And so anytime I was walking around, they were like, oh, the American's out, and no one really bothered me. People actually kind of went out of their way to make sure I felt comfortable. If I was out at night, like at a bar or something with people, people were always like, make sure you don't mess with the American, and the American is here with us and taking care of me, and they were really just kind of overprotective. Sometimes I was like, chill out, I'm grown, I can myself. But no one, I never really felt unsafe at all.
Awesome. That's very good to hear. And yes, those relationships with local people are amazing, and definitely the reason why we are in all of these communities is to become friends with these people, and they will definitely do anything for you, and you only hope that you can give them as much as they've given you. Before we go on to the next question, I'm just realizing, thanks to somebody's very alert attention to detail, I made a mistake here. I wrote that the program departs late June, but I'm incorrect. The program departs early June. Last year it departed June 1st, and it returns around early to mid-August. So my apologies for that mistake. Okay, so next question. What was a cultural experience or event that you got to participate in?
Well, the first week I was there during orientation in Windhoek, they showed us around markets and everything like that, and we had kapana, which is delicious. It's like fried or like barbecued meat, and it's really, really good. But that's more common in the north, and I lived in the south, so I didn't really get to have that as more of a regular experience. The school had an event called African Child Day, where they sang and performed and danced, and so I was able to see that, and it was really beautiful, and I got to film it, and the kids tried to teach me to dance, and I'm very awkward, but it was still fun. Also later on, there was bikers come in from South Africa, and since I was in the South, it was really close, and there's like a bicycle or a motorcycle rally, and so they do tricks and races and everything, so it seemed very like westernized, but it was but with a mix of just being in Namibia and being in the sand dunes. So it was a really fun experience to be with everyone there, just cheering on the bike racer, bike races and everything like that.
That's awesome. Definitely not what I expected you to say.
Exactly.
That's really cool. Okay, last question. As I mentioned to you guys, we have our we have our week of group travel. Usually it's done at the end of the summer. Sometimes it's done in the beginning of the beginning or even the middle. But so can you tell us where you guys went during your group travel?
Yeah, so we ended up starting off going to Etosha National Park, which is towards the north of the country. I'd spent most of my time in the south, and that's when you kind of have a mix of a lot of different more ethnic groups, and in the north it's kind of primarily one ethnic group. So that was different because since I'm black, and I kind of blended in more with the people up there, so it's interesting to have that kind of dynamic there. And we were able to go to a game park, and we camped, and I'm a city person, so camping was a whole new experience, pitching a tent and seeing animals like really up close and personal. And then we drove down south, and we were along the beach and along the Atlantic, and we were in Swakopmund, and we were on sand dunes, and I got to ATV over sand dunes, and sandboard, like snowboarding, but on the sand dunes. That was really fun. And then we went to Sousaflay, and that's it's more just has its own natural spring, so we went swimming in those, and it was absolutely beautiful. So having the opportunity to kind of be like a tourist and see different places in the country, and it made me feel great about really diving into where I was during those 6 weeks, because I didn't really feel like, oh, every weekend I should be exploring Namibia on my own, because I knew I would have that experience at the end to see a variety of places. And so I really got to build close relationships that I still WhatsApp and Facebook a lot of the people that I was living near in Namibia, in Kois. So it was nice to have that experience.
That is such a great point, that you're right. You can really immerse yourself in the community and not fear that you're missing out, right? FOMO is a thing, but you won't have it, because by the end of the summer you will have hit all of those places, and hey, you'll have already paid for it. You won't have to spend any money. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, if you guys have questions on Namibia, just chat them in and we can come back, but we're going to go forward. So I am very sad to say that Eileen has not made it online yet. She's on the West Coast, and I'm afraid that her class, she's still a student, and I'm afraid that her class has gone late, and so we're going to have to go forward without chatting too much about Nepal. As you'll see here, we're teaching English in elementary and high schools in the Kathmandu Valley, and you're living with the host family. I'm so sad that I don't have specific details to share. I know that somebody had just asked a question about visiting Mount Everest and all of that detail. So when I get more information, I'm going to send it to you guys via email. Also, we will be able to hear from Eileen at another point, so I can connect people with Eileen and with other volunteers from Nepal to hear about it. It was a new program for us last year, and we got amazing feedback. So we're pretty excited to go forward there. I am so sorry that I don't have more information to share with you guys about Nepal, but we will address that later. So for now, let's save some time and go forward. Okay, Poland. We've got Kate. Kate, I know Poland and South Africa, you guys are being so patient because we're almost getting to you. So Kate, thank you so much for joining us. You were a volunteer last year in Poland, so we would love to hear about it. So tell us, how was it living with the host family, eating all your meals with them? How was that experience for you?
Sure. So living with host families was the highlight of my time in Poland. I lived with 3 different host families. Moving host families was a pretty typical experience for people on my program, which I think is nice. It kept the families from becoming too sick of us, I guess. And it was great to get to travel around the country and live in different areas. So I lived with one host family in a town called Mazowiecki, and then I lived in 2 different host families while I was in Siedlce, which was a bigger city. Living with a host family was wonderful. My host parents in each of the families were very protective and cared about where I was and wanted to be in touch with me and involved in hearing about my life back home. And I also had host siblings that were similar in age to me, so all of them were 18 at every house that I lived in. And that was something I requested and would recommend new volunteers if you like to be around children or people, if you're students still of your age, request that, because I think the program could do wonders, and those families really appreciated having a native English speaker around to speak to their kids. So in terms of English speaking with the host families, the first family, the parents spoke no English, which was definitely a challenge, but a really wonderful one. And the second two, there was some English interspersed, but a lot of learning still. In terms of meals, Brooke has heard me talk about this before, but meals in Poland were delicious, and yet the most challenging part probably of my time there, because the way that people show hospitality is just by feeding you constantly. So I ate multiple meals a day, all meat and carb based. Wouldn't take no for an answer in terms of servings and portion sizes, and just didn't have the opportunity with teaching to exercise very much. So at times that was a little different than what I was used to, but all in all, completely worth it. I mean, everything was delicious, and eating meals with the family is the best thing you can do, I think, to be immersed in a culture. I felt so connected to just the rhythms of their day. It's wonderful.
Awesome. That's great. And just so you guys know, in some countries, you could be living with one host family for those full 6 weeks. So sometimes you'll be moving, but normally not. So it's cool that you got to experience a couple different families and that all of them were positive, because as we know, living with a host family can be difficult. It can definitely be challenging. Okay, next question. So Poland, why Poland? Like, Poland is Europe. We're working in developing communities, developing countries, or low-income countries. But why do you think that, and World Teach has been in Poland for years and years, so why do you think that there's a need for volunteer teachers specifically in the community where you were?
Right. So Poland is still, you know, a relatively, it's not a country with the most resources, especially in the rural areas where I was. I think it's different if you grow up in Warsaw or you grow up in Krakow, but where I was, most of the materials they were using were very outdated, old British textbooks, and yet students are expected, every student in Poland is expected to take a large exam called the Matura, which essentially determines the rest of their life, determines what kind of school they can go to, what kind of job they can get, determines if they will have the kind of acumen to leave the country and work somewhere else, determines everything. And a huge part of that exam is English, English literacy skills and speaking skills. But for students that are in towns with less resources, that can be very difficult because their families don't have the money to pay private tutors or teachers for English lessons outside of the classroom. And English lessons in the classroom are fast and don't involve a lot of speaking. So the students don't feel very confident in terms of their speaking skills. So basically there's this large market for this exam that's extremely important that students are systematically disadvantaged by if they don't live in one of the bigger cities or if their families don't have the resources. The great thing about World Teach is that we offer these programs for free. So students can come, often, you know, extremely bright students that just excel in their classrooms, but don't have the opportunity to practice their English outside, and therefore will be totally, you know, at a disadvantage when they take the exam, and they're able to come, and even, you know, taking classes for 3 or 4 weeks in the summer makes a huge difference in their skills during the school year. And so many of them come back to this program every single summer because it's so helpful to them.
That's awesome. A listener just texted in asking if you spoke any Polish prior to departure, which, as you can see at the bottom of her biography, you hadn't. Kate had no prior experience with Polish language. So were there any instructors that you worked with who spoke English?
There were not. I was really on my own. I got very good at sign language. I picked up Polish words here and there. I used the older students often as translators, particularly with the younger kids, the elementary school kids. I would have one of the high school girls in the class with me to help, which was great. But got very good at pointing and smiling and nodding and picking up a few words here and there, and it was definitely manageable. People were very kind and understanding. But no, there was not a lot of English where I was.
Nice. Okay, quickly, what was your daily schedule like?
Sure. So in the morning I would teach classes. I taught whole age range, so elementary schoolers and middle schoolers every other day, high schoolers every day. And then when I moved towns, I taught a university group that was mostly adults, which was very cool. So I would teach classes in the morning after getting up and eating breakfast with my host family, and then my afternoons were incredibly wonderful. We would swim and go on these long bike rides in the country and visit extended family, and on the weekends we would take trips to the lake and we would go camping and go to music festivals. So my host families were very interested in giving me a very holistic experience of life, and we would travel a lot, but also we just experienced a lot of daily life together, and I feel like I had a real summer, very restful. And at night we would all have dinner together, usually watch the World Cup, and then I would plan my lessons for the next day and take about 2 hours to do that every night and get materials ready and things like that.
Awesome.
So, yes.
That does sound pretty nice. Just so you know, guys listening, not everyone's going to have such a restful experience. It's definitely very challenging. But when you can find your comfort zone in this, what was once an unfamiliar place, that is when you know you've been successful, when you've created a home across the world. Okay, last question, Kate. And then South Africa, we're coming to you. So where did you travel during your group travel reflection week?
Sure. So we had a week in the middle of the program where we all gathered together and we went to Krakow, and then we went to Zakopane, which is in the south of Poland in the mountains. Extremely beautiful. And then the last week of the program we were in Warsaw as a group.
Very cool. And so that last week, that was your end of service?
Yes.
Okay. So for all those listening, you guys will definitely have your opportunity to travel. Sorry if you hear my echo. Okay, we're going on to South Africa. So I can stop speaking so you don't have to listen to me. Jacqueline, thank you so much for your patience.
Yeah.
So let's just address these questions here. Did you feel safe? Number one question.
Yes, that's a good question. Oh my gosh, I can hear an echo from your speaking.
That's okay.
Sorry.
We'll just push through.
Yes, I did feel safe. What I would say is that it's like obviously important to have some knowledge of what you're walking into and be a smart traveler and visitor. There was never a time that I felt like unsafe, that the safety was at risk, but there were just
Here, I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. Kate, Messenger, can you put yourself on mute? I think that's where we're getting your echo. Okay. Yes. Whew.
Does that work?
Yes, Jacqueline, I'm sorry. Can you begin again? My apologies.
Yeah. No, that's fine. So did I feel safe? And my answer was yes, I did feel safe. I always erred on the side of caution though, so I was never walking around by myself, never really traveled anywhere by myself or put myself in a situation that I thought would be unsafe. And part of that was my host family. My host dad in particular was very clear and protective and to tell me what would be safe and unsafe. So, but for the most part, as long as you kind of know and you can ask questions and the people around you will tell you, hey, that's not a good idea or that's not a problem. But yeah, I never felt unsafe.
Good. That is the attitude to have. What I call healthy paranoia. You do not go out alone. You listen to the locals. You especially listen to your host family. They know much better than you. So don't ever assume that you know the place. It's good to be paranoid. It's healthy. Okay. Next question. What was the biggest cultural challenge that you faced there, whether in the school or in the community?
Yeah, so I had actually been to South Africa before, but this summer was very different than what I had before. The actual biggest cultural challenge that I faced teaching for World Teach was at the school. So I was teaching grade R, the equivalent of kindergarten, and it was hard for me to kind of navigate the different ways that the teachers taught and specifically how they disciplined. They're just the way that they were for the colored culture. In South Africa, it was to be very strict and use a very stern voice and, exactly by the rules. There were kind of no warnings or anything like that, and that was just not something that I was used to or kind of had studied in my education studies or anything like that. So to try to navigate being culturally sensitive, but also by disciplining or teaching in a way that I was comfortable with was kind of my biggest challenge.
Absolutely. That's great. Okay, next question, because we're running out of time. How was it living with the host family and meals, food down there, all of that?
Yes, so I absolutely loved living with my host family. I actually lived with 2 other volunteers with my host family, so there's 3 of us. And I kind of had a unique experience that my host mother was the teacher that I taught with. And that was absolutely amazing. Her and I got along so well, and it was awesome to kind of come home and be able to hang out with my host sisters and family. And just in South Africa, there's family in and out all the time. And the meals were phenomenal. They had breakfast set out for me. Even if I got up early, they had it set out. They made a lunch for me, and then dinners was a lot of curry, but it was great and
delicious.
One of my favorite times.
Delicious. That's awesome. Okay. And what would you say was your biggest accomplishment, or what did you take away from this experience?
Yeah, so that's like a hard question for the biggest accomplishment side of things, but definitely I took a lot away from the experience in terms of understanding how to learn and work with others. I was very cognizant of like working with the other teachers of the school that I was working in. So I feel like I kind of took away how to be able to work alongside those teachers in a partnership. Yes, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. For those listening, you might be thinking you're going to be a teacher one day. You might be thinking, maybe I don't want to teach, but you are going to learn so many skills in the classroom that are transferable to any other field. And those communication skills that Jacqueline is referring to, that is the #1 thing that you will take away. Learning to work alongside people from another community, from another culture, language, religion, background, that is hard. I think every panelist on the line can agree that that is hard. But once you can do that, you can work and collaborate and learn from anybody. And if every person in North America had that lesson, then I think we would be a much better country for it, or excuse me, continent. So therefore,
Yes.
that's a great takeaway. That's a great takeaway. Okay. That is beautiful. I think that we are going to go to our Q&A because we've got some great questions here coming in from a lot of different people that I'm going to quickly try to run through. Okay. #1, are the majority of volunteers in these programs female? Yes, I have to say yes. Tonight we do have we have only females on the line, but I can tell you we do have plenty of guys as well. Current college students, college graduates, and even older volunteers into their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So there are men. Actually, we have a lot of great videos from our volunteers to show what we call a day in their life, how creative, and a lot of them are from guys. Maybe they're good video editors, but we do have plenty of male teachers, and I think that's something we need to strive for more of in the world, right? Okay.
Can I just say something on
Yes,
that, Brooke?
please.
I just want to like really encourage men to apply and definitely get involved, because what I have found working in South Africa, and other people can correct me if other countries are different, is that they really need those like male role models. So like although my group was primarily women, the men that were there were like loved, and their role was like definitely needed. So.
That is great. That's very good to hear. Thank you so much for saying that, Jacqueline. Okay, next question. Flights, who arranges them? Who are you traveling with? This is a good logistical question. As we mentioned, you're paying for your flights, but we will be helping you arrange them. So we will create like a group flight that everybody can then purchase their tickets for, so that you are traveling together, or at least arriving around the same time, because of course people are coming from all over the world. So we are in communication with you pretty heavily for those pre-departure steps, including flights. Next question, acceptance, and is it binding? So once you're accepted into the program, you will have about a week or two, probably 2 weeks, to actually confirm your placement, which means submitting a $500 deposit. So you do have that time to think about it, to ask questions, to do your research, to ask the hard questions, etc. And after that $500 confirmation placement, which of course goes towards your volunteer fee, that is non-refundable. So you absolutely have to be certain of your decision. Next question. Sorry, we've got one here, a great one. What relationship does World Teach have with our host families? How are host families selected for the program, and how are they matched to students? Great question. So our in-country field director works with usually the in-country partner, whether it's the certain schools that we're working with or the Ministry of Education or a local NGO. So our field director is working with that local organization to do the in-country details, and the majority of that are those host families. So the host families are usually part of like what we call the World Teach community. So like Kate was saying, I think it was Kate, no, it was Jacqueline who said that you lived with a woman that actually taught at your school. So that happens because it's part of the World Teach community. So people that find out about our program are usually super eager to host a volunteer because A, they are paid rent, and B, it's an amazing cultural immersion opportunity, and they can learn English the same way that you're learning the local language. So that happens pretty organically, and we're very proud of those relationships. So they are being paid rent. So there is no abuse going on here. Those people are definitely benefiting, and they're also, I think, dedicated to the mission that we are also pursuing. So there will be nobody in this just for the money. These people are looking for the cultural exchange that you're looking for. We've been doing this for many years, and of course there have been some families that have not been the right fit, and therefore we will move volunteers. But that doesn't happen often. But it's absolutely about the safety and the happiness of the volunteer, and also the safety and the happiness of the host family. My host family that I lived with in Colombia, they're now absolutely my family. So yeah, we take that very seriously. Any other questions? Text them in, raise your hand. Caitlin, do we have any other questions that we should address?
So I think I've answered most of them. I've been sending out some answers via chat. So you already covered a few of the ones that I had answered, but I don't see any new ones. So now's the time. Oh,
I
here
see.
comes another. This is a great question. So, and a few people have asked me this already. So when will the official program dates be posted? That is an excellent question, and I want to thank you guys for your patience on that. We're very, very close to posting the official program dates for 2015. I'm going to say within the month it's definitely going to be posted. They will be very similar to the previous departure dates. So that's definitely something that if you want to email me and ask about your specific program, I can tell you what the departure dates were for 2014, and you can assume they'll be very similar. But definitely within the next few weeks, the official program dates will be posted for 2015.
Okay. There was a question that you had addressed, Caitlin, already privately that I'll tell everybody about. So it was a great question from Mary about if some programs are more competitive than others, and can you apply to more than one. So you apply to only one program of your choice, and so that's why it's so important to do the research as to what the program entails, who you'll be teaching, where you'll be living, and if it meets the, your priorities as to what you want to do with your summer. So yes, some programs are a bit more competitive than others, just because on some programs we do have space allotments, and so for that reason we do recommend people to get their application in earlier, because we exist on a rolling basis, rolling admissions, meaning once you are finished with your application, you'll receive that decision within 2 to 3 weeks. So it's not like we have to say, oh, this one is more competitive than that one. For our year-long programs, we have a big difference because we have a lot of funded programs where it's free to the volunteer. But for our summer programs, all of them do require a volunteer fee, so that kind of balances out the game. Okay, there was a hand raised by Tyler, or Tyshell, excuse me. Did I miss that?
Tyshell, yeah.
Tyshell. Great question, Abby. Okay, Abby, in Costa Rica, did living in Costa Rica help your Spanish?
Oh, absolutely. I took a couple years in high school, and then I went to Costa Rica in between my sophomore and junior year of college. So there was a lot of stuff that was forgotten in those couple of years, embarrassingly enough. So when I talked to the taxi cab driver, there was a lot of stuff that I thought I was saying right, and he had no clue what I was saying. So the first week was definitely a learning experience. You definitely have to learn a lot about yourself with that. By the end of it, I'm still nowhere close to fluent, but I'm able to communicate any of the needs that I have. I'm able to understand a lot more of what people say. So it's amazing how much you pick up in that short amount of time. And like you mentioned a little bit earlier with the orientation, you will have language classes in the morning. So the entire first week you're there, every morning I was taking language classes from a Costa Rican teacher. So she was really great about helping us out, meeting us at our individual level, and then helping us make a lot of gains in the language so we felt more comfortable with that.
Awesome. Okay, that's beautiful. Thank you for answering that. So actually also from Taishel, you had another good question about altitude sickness. So altitude sickness would have referred to Ecuador, right? Because Costa Rica, or correct me if I'm wrong, is the altitude high in Costa Rica or only in Ecuador?
I think it can be depending on where you're at. I didn't have a problem with it. Where we have orientation, that is up in the mountains, and then I lived in the mountains. But it wasn't ever an issue for me or any of the other volunteers there.
Okay, perfect. Taishel, I lived in Bogota, Colombia, where the altitude is quite high, higher than Denver. I believe very high. And yes, a lot of people will feel it for about 2 or 3 weeks. As long as you drink a lot of water and just don't go running up mountains and steps, you'll be fine. But some people do suffer from it more severely, and I can tell you all about how to deal with that. And the local people will have their own medicine for that as well. So definitely a good question. Another great question, and then we're going to wrap up. Are the fees tax deductible? Yes, that is a beautiful question. We are a nonprofit organization. All of the fees, the volunteer fees, are absolutely tax deductible. So whether it's you making a contribution to your volunteer fee or your friend donating on your behalf or your family member, those fees, you will receive a receipt for those, and they are absolutely a tax deduction. Great question. Okay, another beautiful question from Daniel about the experience for older volunteers in their 30s. So all of our panelists on the line right now are young. However, I was a volunteer in Colombia as a 28-year-old. We had volunteers in their 40s and 50s as well. And as I mentioned, we send volunteers up into their 70s. The experience, and everyone will tell you this regardless of their age, the experience is what you make it. You can be as involved in the community as you want, or you can be as involved with the other volunteers as you want. For me, I didn't want to see another English speaker until the end of the year, so I chose not to. I was absolutely at one with my community. So you make it what you want. You spend your time in the classroom how you want. You spend your time outside of the classroom as you want. That your community will be extremely welcoming to you regardless of your age. You can also make certain requests based on your preferences in terms of like your housing situation, and also going into it whether a country, for example, like Costa Rica, you'll be living with a host family. If you aren't looking for a host family experience, you would apply to a program like China. But you need to pay attention to those details because that will limit you or kind of direct you into the direction that you want to go to. But I think the age our older volunteers only bring additional experiences to the position, and they end up being more interesting. No offense to you guys on the line with us, but
Oh, can I add something?
absolutely, please.
Yeah, I've just a couple years out of college after while I was volunteering, and so I felt like that enhanced my experience a little more. It kind of gave me a little focus when looking on what I want to do with my life and kind of solidifying the fact that I am glad I'm a teacher. And also, I really felt like I connected better than a lot of the people who were still students, no offense, but to the people who were teachers at the school, because I felt like I was more their peer than someone who was like a little younger than them, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much. Yes. Please, go for it.
So I'm pretty young, but one of my best friends on the trip was another volunteer who was like, she might get mad at me for saying she was in her 30s, but she was like older. She had like her job. She was also a teacher. And she actually had the best time of any of us and ended up meeting an Ecuadorian that she really liked. She went back to see him at Christmas. He came to see her over the summer. We're expecting to hear that they're engaged any time now. So definitely don't have to be like 20 to enjoy the trip.
Yeah, no, thank you for that as well. Yeah, I think that the older I think the older you are, again, the more perspective you're going to bring to this, and it will also have much more impact into your career, though it will definitely impact younger volunteers as well for their career and their personal lives. So let's see, any other questions? Last chance for questions. This has been amazing. Any panelists on the line want to add any last thing that you think that we may have missed? Okay, Caitlin, you think we're good?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think it's been very successful.
Awesome. All right.
Lots of questions answered.
Lots of questions. And if anyone has more questions, send them in. So I'm sorry, I forgot to kind of go through these pictures that we have here, but we're just going to get to our last slide. And as a quick, that's Ecuador, by the way. This is Nepal, I believe. We have, what is this, Namibia, and then, okay, I'm just wasting your time now. We're going to get to the end here. So next steps. We have alumni reviews online. Check them out. You can speak with our panelists on the line now or even other country experts. And then also the videos that I mentioned. So we have tons of these videos. It's incredible. You can see where they lived, where they went to school, how they got to school, what they did in their spare time, everything. So thank you guys so much. And we'll see you abroad next summer. Thanks, guys.